Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Prescribing Lifestyle. Today, we're going to show you the masterclass that I recorded with Carla v. Carter. The date of recording was 16th of April 2024. That night, the topic was low carb for chronic conditions. Carla is a nutritionist in Melbourne. She suffered from fibromyalgia, which is an autoimmune condition. She shared her journey on how she came with the diagnosis, how she overcame it, and the difference between low carb and keto and how it worked for her. We also answered lots of questions from the listeners. I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get going. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the masterclass, Low Carb for Chronic Conditions. I have invited Carla v. Carter to have a chat with us about her story, her condition. She's a nutritionist from Melbourne. So thank you for coming in, Carla.
And you're very welcome, Amy.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You're most welcome to come and ask questions in the chat function. I'll get everybody to mute themselves. This masterclass might be reused for a different purpose. So yeah, so excited to have this masterclass.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. So Carla, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in your own words, just a bit of an introduction on what you're about.
Sure. My name's Carla, and I'm a nutritionist and a keto coach. I've studied nutrition and health psychology, which I think is a really great combination, because I think whenever you're changing the way you eat, that it's really important to have strategies from a psychological point of view as well. My own journey is a bit of a long, twisty, windy one. I spent a lot of my life yo-yo dieting, and never really being able to find that sort of magic combination of, things. I had the will and the motivation and, did all the things that everybody does that works in the short term and not in the long term. And then eventually I found low carb, and that was like just absolutely life-changing. So on my low carb journey, I've lost about 30 kilos, but in that journey, what I discovered, even though I started it for weight loss purposes, what I discovered was that it had so many other benefits. And during that time, I had fibromyalgia, which even though I'd studied nutrition and I knew how important food was, I didn't really link, low carb and fibro at the time. But what I have found is that it has literally revolutionized my life. And I used to be just in chronic pain every day. I didn't sleep well. I had no energy. My legs felt like lead. Like walking around the block was like you'd ask me to climb Mount Everest. Like it was just, everything was hard work. Just keeping my head above water was, just with two young kids and one of them with a disability, it just almost sent me to the nut house. And so when I was on low carb, it did help a bit. But when I went keto, it was like rocket fuel. Like it was unbelievable. And the changes that I saw were quite quick. And I had so much more energy. I actually wanted to exercise. Not that I didn't want to previously, but I just felt it was so hard. But now I just had energy that I wanted to expend, which I hadn't felt for so long. And yeah, slept better mood, like just so many things. And as time went on, every couple of months, I'd think, oh, that's another symptom that's gone. And I'd think, oh, gosh, that hay fever I get every year, it's like it's hardly affecting me. And, oh, I'm not allergic to the dog anymore. And, oh, that sort of arthritis type of pain I had in my finger has disappeared. And, just bit by bit, I would just keep experiencing all these new things that would, just disappear. And so I'm just a really strong believer in low carb and keto for a number of different conditions. But I think for me, my personal experience with fibromyalgia means that, I love working with other people with fibromyalgia, but I've got a lot of other clients with a myriad of different issues that it's helped as well. So I think it's getting to the underlying cause of a lot of different issues, and it's so much better than just taking medication, which is like a band-aid. For me, this feels like getting to the root cause. And even though I consider that my fibromyalgia is something I manage, it's not something that I've cured. But it's given me a new lease on life. It's given me an ability to live, relatively normally. I mean, I still have to take my health very seriously, and I can't sort of let it slip. Otherwise, things do go back to how they were. So, but that's a big motivator, and something I always talk to my clients about is you have to have your why. Why are you doing it? For me, people say, well, how do you sustain it? How do you keep doing it? And I say, because I feel so terrible if I don't do it. For me, the ketones are like my medicine, and if I'm not producing them, I don't feel good. So, like you wouldn't tell someone who was, type 1 diabetic, or stop taking your insulin, see how you feel. It's like, you'd feel absolutely terrible, and eventually you die. I mean, obviously I'm not going to die, but, for me, it's like I say, it's like medicine. So it's a lifestyle. It's not a diet. It's something that I feel like I'm going to do forever, unless anything radically changes, which I can't imagine. But I'm always open. But yeah, for right now, I've been doing it for many years, and see lots of benefit, not just for myself, but for my clients, and very passionate about it, and love spreading the word. And
That's amazing. That's amazing journey, Carla.
Thanks.
How did you discover you have fibromyalgia? When was that?
Look, I don't actually remember exactly how many years ago. It's probably about 10 years ago, I'd say. I had all the symptoms. Every time I'd go to the osteo, I'd say, oh, like I've got a pain in my neck. And then I'd go back the next week and I'd say, oh, that's fixed. Now it's in my shoulders. And then I'd go back the next week and I'd say, oh, now it's in my back. And I think the osteo just kept looking at me like I was crazy, like I had this moving pain. Like, was I, I think he thought maybe I was a hypochondriac or something. And, and I just had all these issues, and I went to the doctor and I said, I've got all these issues, and like they're not getting better. And so they sent me to a neurologist who, on my first appointment, they did all their prod and poke and ask questions and stuff. And then as I was walking out the door, he said, I could diagnose you with fibromyalgia, but what would be the point? So
What?
I walked to have that appointment thinking, what on earth is fibromyalgia? Why wouldn't you diagnose me if you think that's what I've got? And what? Like my mind was just exploding. I was like, what is this guy talking about? So
Have you heard of the condition beforehand?
oh, look, maybe vaguely, but I really didn't know anything about it. And so, of course, nothing got better because he didn't tell me, didn't give me any suggestions or anything at all. So I went back to the GP and I said, obviously nothing's changed. And she said, we'll go back to him. So, I mean, now that I think about it, it's probably pretty stupid to go back to the same doctor who was so dismissive. But anyway, I went back to the same doctor. When you're in that foggy, because fibromyalgia as well, it causes brain fog. So you're not thinking straight. So it's actually really hard to get answers and to help yourself because your brain's actually not working. And it's a very vicious cycle because if your brain's not working, you can't absorb the information properly. And so it's very hard to actually be proactive. So you kind of just go along with whatever people tell you they think's a good idea. So the doctor said, go back. So I went back and he prodded and poked and asked questions and la, la, la. He said, oh, well, I'll diagnose you with fibromyalgia. And I said, okay, great. I've got a label. I'm a true believer that, if you know what you're dealing with, that then you've got tools that you can use because, you can't help yourself if you don't know what's wrong. So I said, fantastic. Right, great. Tell me what to do. And he said, oh, well, there's nothing really you can do. Some people find exercise helps and some people find, there's one medication that might be helpful. And I said, okay, so if I take this medication, is it going to change my life? Is it like amazing? He said, no, not really. I said, well, I'm not a fan of medication that's like kind of maybe, might help, like I'd like to go the natural route if I can. But, if there's a medication that's going to change my life, I'll consider it. But if you're telling me it's not even that great, then I'm not going to do it. So I left with no more information than when I'd first arrived, other than this mystery word, fibromyalgia. And I guess, over the years I did, more research into it. But, at the time my brain was still foggy. So it was still kind of hard to, hadn't discovered low carb yet.
Yeah, yeah.
It was hard to really do too much. But I did research, some supplements and some different things and, put a few things in place, sort of like focusing, I guess, on the anti-inflammatory sort of side of things. Because for people who don't know, fibromyalgia, it's not a very well understood condition. It's more like a cluster of symptoms that they diagnose you on. And they include things like widespread pain and sleep issues and mood issues. And there's a whole host of signs and symptoms that not everybody has. Some you have and some you don't. And sometimes I've looked at lists of all of these signs and symptoms and been so surprised at a whole bunch of things that I didn't realize were related, were all kind of under this umbrella.
Wow.
But it's basically it's your nervous system overreacting.
Okay.
And so what happens is that something that for me, this doesn't happen very much anymore, but if I would just bend the wrong way and my whole back would spasm, because my body had sent signals to my brain completely overreacting on one little bend saying, danger, you need to protect your back. So, all the muscles seized up so that I wouldn't move anymore because it thought that it was, something really bad had happened. And so this overreaction meant that I had to be super careful with even the smallest things. Just unpacking the dishwasher, could be me, in absolute agony, if I bent the wrong way or, whatever it was. So I really lived in fear, actually, for a number of years, that especially if I had the kids by myself, what would happen if I was in complete agony and I couldn't move? Like, it would literally be like, I once went to a yoga class. I lay down on the mat. On the way down, my whole back spasmed. I sat there for an hour and a half whilst everyone did yoga until the end. Could not move. Had to wait until the end, and then everybody got me heat packs and anti-inflammatories and all sorts of things, and eventually I could get up.
Wow.
So yeah, it's basically the body just completely overreacting. And so so I kind of went on this journey of like, I did find some things that helped a little bit, but I always say, for me, it's like a puzzle. And there's lots of bits of the puzzle. There's food, there's exercise, there's stress, there's sleep, there's, toxins, there's all sorts of things that I have to be mindful of. But for me, keto and the ketone, not only the ketones that are produced from ketosis, but also the lack of refined foods and sugar, that for me is my major, biggest piece of my puzzle, that without that, I'm not, I don't function well. So yeah, I'm a very big believer in the power of food, and it might not be right for everybody, but it certainly is the piece of the puzzle that's worked for me and made the biggest difference. So sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to your question about getting diagnosed.
No, that was amazing. Yeah. So, and how did you discover low carb in the beginning?
So I studied nutrition and never heard of it. But then just in my own research, I decided to go sugar-free. So I was sugar-free for many, many years. And once you start doing research into sugar, it's kind of the natural next step, I guess, to find low carb, because people who are low carb are obviously cutting out sugar. So the more research I did, the more it just led me naturally to low carb. And so then I thought, right, I felt like it felt right. Like all the times in the past that I'd tried different things, it kind of I didn't have much hope, but I had hope with low carb. I really felt like it was going to make a difference. And then, once you get into the low carb world, keto is kind of the next logical step. You hear people talking about keto, and I also started this whole journey as a vegetarian as well, which I think, throughout this journey, added fish, then I added chicken, then I added meat. And now I just love meat, and I can't believe I never ate it before. And I think that actually is a part of why, the improvements that I've seen as well. I think I'm eating so much more nutritious foods now as well. And so, yeah, I think, it's a combination of factors. It's the cutting out the carbs, it's the meat, and it's the ketones produced. So yeah, it's been a bit of a slow kind of curvy kind of, yeah, sugar-free, low
Yeah.
carb, keto. And when I went from low carb to keto, I didn't actually realize how big of a jump that was, because I was low carb, but I was very sort of um a bit more permissive, I guess, than I am now. Like I'd sort of have one cheat meal a week, and I'd,
Mm.
occasionally have a little bit of sweet potato. And, I didn't eat all the main things. I didn't eat, rice and pasta and bread and all of that stuff, or
Hmm.
sugar or anything. But
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much kind of added up. And then when
Wow.
I actually went keto and I really weighed and measured everything, and I was like, oh my goodness, like even as a nutritionist, I was shocked at where carbs would hide when you actually really
Mhm.
get down to the nitty gritty, and add it all up. And at the beginning, especially before I was in consistent ketosis, just even having, a lot of, say like too many berries and tomatoes and nuts and, whatever, all adding up, to the carbohydrate load that would mean that I wasn't in a deep state of ketosis. And I'd be like, oh, wow, gosh, that's like, it's surprising, So
Yeah, yeah.
not that any of those foods are bad, but it's just that if you want to be in ketosis as opposed to low carb, you just have to be more mindful about the amounts of things in a given day. That's all.
But when you went from standard diet to low carb diet, did you notice a bit of difference already?
Oh yeah, definitely I did. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely. I lost weight. It felt it was a real struggle initially because I really feel like I was very addicted to carbohydrates, and I
Mm.
had a very stressful life. My oldest son has severe autism, and
Mm.
I really used food as a reward. Oh my God,
Mm.
this is really full on, and I feel like, yeah, a muffin will make me feel better. And
Mm.
and that was like I literally would be fantasizing about, when I could get my next muffin
Yes.
hit, you know.
Yes.
And so it really was like I felt like I was coming off a drug. But once I got through that, yeah, I definitely, yeah, I lost weight. I had more energy. I definitely felt better. But because I had fibromyalgia, I needed something extra, like for
Yes.
me,
Yes.
it wasn't enough. And that's
Yep.
some people do really well just low carb. They don't need to be
Yes.
keto. But for
Yep.
me, that difference, that made that leap, I think that the change from low carb to keto was probably bigger than the change from standard to low carb. Even
Yes.
though that was, a very good step in the right direction.
That's
Yeah,
it.
the ketones for me are magic.
Yes. I think this lesson just says everyone is different. You've got to find what suits you, and you've got to
Yep.
try and error. You've got to discover your own journey.
Absolutely. But I would say for anyone that has, inflammatory conditions, that the ketones can be really useful because they
Mm.
are anti-inflammatory.
Yes.
Yeah, and they do also, help to dampen an overactive nervous system, which is exactly what fibromyalgia is. So I think it's
Yep.
can be really useful for that.
Mm.
And also it can increase GABA as well, which is a calming neurotransmitter. So that's really positive for someone that has maybe the mood issues associated with fibromyalgia. So there's lots of
Mm.
benefits, but I have patients with fibromyalgia who, they don't need to go all the way to keto. They feel
Mhm.
benefit just from low carb, and there is research on that showing an improvement in in pain and other things with fibromyalgia going low carb, not necessarily keto. So yeah,
Great.
there is actual evidence as well, not just my personal story.
Yeah. We might go to a question. So Peter said on the Metabolic Mind YouTube channel, they talk about low carb slash keto effects on the mind and mental conditions and how ineffective medications can be. He said he measures his ketones on keto sticks and they are always dark pink, but I have trouble feeling better, although my mood are very stable. He also wants to lose weight and lift weight and gain muscle, which is happening slowly. Do you think if I fast for several days, do you think this can help improve my mood?
Well, like you said before, Avi, I do think it's very individual.
Mm.
And it's hard to know with just that much information. I mean, I certainly think it's possible. Some people feel amazing. Some people almost feel euphoric when they fast,
Yes.
and other people really struggle. So I think it sounds like you're fat adapted if you're
Yes, it
in
does sound like
ketosis.
that. Yep.
So it should be easier for you. Like, I would never recommend anyone goes from just a standard diet to just full on into long fasts, because I think that you do need to do it gradually. So assuming that you are fat adapted and that you are in ketosis, then I think it would be much easier. I'd definitely take some sugar-free electrolytes though if you're going to do a longer fast.
Yes.
I think that's important. And look, I would just see how you feel, and if you feel worse, then stop, and and maybe ring AV and get medical advice. But yeah, I think it is individual. I can't promise, but yes, some people do definitely feel much better. But there is no one size fits all, and I know some people hear stories and say, oh, I went keto or I did fast or whatever, and I, cured my depression or my bipolar or my whatever it is, and there are people who have incredible results. And there are other people who maybe there are some other underlying factors that need to be addressed as well, whether that's, gut issues or, hormone issues or whatever it is. So, yeah, it's not the same for everybody.
That's right.
So, yeah, so it's one of those things that so long as you're doing it safely, I'd give it a go and, base it on your body and how you're feeling. If it makes you feel good, then it's good, but don't overdo it and do it gradually. And yeah.
Just a reminder that we can't provide individualized medical advice on a medium like this. So we're just providing general advice that you can give it a go and you can see how you feel. And if you fast and if you've got ketones, you might feel a little bit better, and you can train yourself to fast a bit longer. And depending on how you feel, if you don't feel right, break your fast, as Carla said.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the next question is Nola said, would you please distinguish between a low-carb diet and a keto diet, and which would be more beneficial? She's battling between pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, and fatty liver.
Right. So that's a really good question. Sorry, I didn't define that. So low carb, look, the reality is that low carb doesn't have an actual definition. If you look up Wikipedia, it says carbohydrate diet that is lower than the standard. So given that the standard diet's like, I don't know, 250, 300 grams of carbs a day or something, basically, if you're below that, then, theoretically, that means you're on a low carb diet. But what most people mean when they say low carb, some people mean under 100 grams of carbs. I would say probably under 50 grams is probably, 50 to 100 grams, I guess, probably most people mean when they say low carb. But to be in ketosis, so keto itself, it's not a diet, it's actually a biological process. So when you eat low enough carbohydrates for your body, because everyone's body's different, it depends how much exercise you do, how much muscle you have, all that sort of thing. But generally speaking, if you're between 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates a day or less, you should be producing enough ketones to be considered in nutritional ketosis. So everyone produces very, very small amounts, but in order to actually be what they call in nutritional ketosis, and getting the sorts of benefits I'm talking about, then yeah, about 20 grams of carbs a day. And that's, not including, fiber and things like that. That's just the net carbs. So, but as I said, it is very individual. My preference is to test using a breath meter. So I find that much better than blood or urine, just because it's easy. You buy it once, it lasts years. You can use it as often as you like. It's really simple. It literally takes 20 seconds. You just breathe into it. So I think that's the easiest way to do it, and they're pretty accurate as well.
Does it tell you a number? Is there a
yes,
level?
It gives you a number. Yeah, it does. There are different types that have different numbers, a bit like how, in the US and Australia, we would have different measurements. It's like that. There are some there's two different types of measurements that give you different numbers. So I don't want to maybe talk numbers and confuse people, but yeah, so breath monitor I think is really good. When if you actually want to go get yourself into ketosis, I think measuring your ketones is good, because then you know if you've achieved it, and you know for your body how many grams of carbs you can have and still be in ketosis.
What breath meter do you use is the next question.
The one that I personally use it is no longer sold, but I'm pretty sure I think, is it Low Carb Love or something? There's a website.
I've heard of Lumen is what I've heard. Lumen.
Oh yeah, there's Lumen.
But I haven't tried it. I haven't tried it myself.
Yeah, that's not the one that I've used. But if you message me on Instagram, I will send you a link or the name of the company or whatever when I look it up. I'm keto_by_design. So if you just give me a DM on Instagram, I'll look it up. I think the website's called Low Carb Love, but I'm not 100% sure. And yeah, I think they're about $100, and yeah, they're great. So when you're first going, I think it's really important to measure, but also to weigh and measure your food, because like I said, even though I've studied nutrition, I was surprised where those carbohydrates hide and how much there were in things. So if you're going to stick to that 20 grams of carbs a day, it is much more restrictive. I mean, I don't like that word restrictive, because I don't feel restricted. I feel free from all the issues that I had. But, you know, in terms of how we think of restricting foods, it is more restrictive in that you can't just have copious quantities of low carb foods that still have carbs in it, because it does add up. So just weighing and measuring just for a week or two, just until you get used to what's in things and you get used to what your body can cope with and still be in ketosis, then I think that's important. But again, like I said, for most people, I wouldn't jump straight into keto if you haven't done low carb. I'm a fan of gradual. I think it helps your body to get fat adapted more easily. I always think at the beginning, at least at the beginning, take some sugar-free electrolytes. That really helps. But I always start off doing whole foods first, so including, you know, like sweet potato and rice and things like that, if you're on a standard diet, and then cut those and do low carb, but still include as many sort of, you know, fruit and veggies as you want, and then cut those down and start weighing and measuring and get into ketosis, so that just so you're not shocking your body. Because if you go from eating a standard diet to keto, your body's going to go, oh my God, where am I getting my energy from? I'm used to using the carbohydrates, and now I've got nothing, because it doesn't know how to access that fat. It needs to be taught. So, and that's the other thing at the beginning as well. You need to have plenty of fat in your diet, so your body's got easy access to energy. And then as time goes on, you can reduce the fat and increase the protein more. But at the start, you need to, you know, make it easy for your body. You don't want to struggle and feel terrible.
Sometimes we find bowel symptoms like constipation, or your gut not adjusted to it properly. So gradually getting into it is really good.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Just about the ketone meter, I actually have been taught the blood ketone is much more reliable. So that's what I've been taught by what I've learned. So I've bought a ketone finger prick meter called Freestyle Optimum Neo. And I use the finger prick meter, except you've got to buy the strips as well. The ketone meter also can do a glucose finger prick, glucose level. So I try to do finger prick ketone levels at times, sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah, I've got nothing against that. And I think, look, probably, you know, blood probably is the gold standard, but my research says that the breath meter is not far behind. It's still pretty accurate, and you don't have to buy the strips. You don't have to, you know, worry if someone's, you know, scared of needles, or, you know, doesn't want to, you know, to have the ickiness of the blood. I just find it, you know, it's much more easy, portable. You don't have to keep buying things. But yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic as well. That's just the breath meter is just my preference. But yeah, that's a double bonus too, that you get to test the glucose as well.
That's it. Except that if you are fat adapted for a while, you might not be producing as much ketones in the breath and the blood. So I don't think it matters how much ketones you produce. And if you're not detecting ketones in the breath after you've gone into fat adaptation and you're using up some of the ketones, it might not show up that much in the ketone breath meter.
My understanding is that that's only with urine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I have been keto for about 4 years now and I still blow quite high levels.
Okay.
So yeah, that's just my understanding is that it's the urine definitely as you get through over time reduces the amount that's weed out because the body's
Yeah.
actually using it more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe that it will still show up in blood and breath, but maybe you've had different
Okay. I'll
experience.
look it up. Different
We can
teaching.
confer later. We can research
That's it.
separately.
That's it. I'll look it up. All right, great. That's very, very interesting. So, tell us a bit more about your practice, about what do you do as a nutritionist? Some stories on your experience.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I come from it very individualized. I don't have a one size fits all. I often have people, before they start, they want to know, exactly what are you going to tell me to do and how long are you going to tell me to do it for? And I'm like, I really can't tell you that until I know more about you. So I really don't believe there's a one size fit all, even though I do generally work with people who want to be low carb or keto because that's how they find me, because that's my kind of main area of expertise. But that is certainly not all I do. And there would be, for example, I had a young teenage boy who came to me. His parents were worried about, his eating, and he was eating half of the amount of daily protein as recommended by the government, which already I think is on the low side. So I was not going to tell this kid, not that I think that most children need to be low carb anyway, but I wasn't even going to tell him to cut out sugar. My main focus was, you need more protein. You are a growing boy, and also once you add more protein in, then you push out some of the other foods because protein's very satiating. So, in that instance, I'm not going to say, oh, well, I'm a low carb keto coach, that's what I do. Like, of course, it doesn't suit, but most people who come to me do want to be low carb keto, whether it's for weight loss or often people have insulin resistance or pre-diabetes or diabetes, those sorts of issues. But, I've had people come to me with skin issues and other things as well, that keto has helped. So, and fibromyalgia, of course. So what I do is I get people to fill out a questionnaire and a food diary first before I speak to them, because that gives me an understanding of where we're starting from. And I think having a food diary is really important, because if I say to someone, what do you eat? People tend to be a bit vague, but if you get them to actually write down everything they eat for a week before they talk to you, then, it can be quite eye-opening. And I get them to write down not just what they eat, but whether it was planned and how they felt when they ate it, so that we can get to the bottom of some things. If people constantly tell me that they're eating unplanned food, then that's a really good indicator of something we need to work on, because if you don't plan your food, it's much, much easier to eat things that are just that quick energy hit rather than something that's going to sustain you. So yeah, again, looking at the psychology as well as the actual food. So, and then I provide people with, food lists and food meal ideas. And, we talk about all sorts of stuff. We talk about not just what to eat, but how to cope in a social situation, what to order if you go to a restaurant, how to deal with the mother-in-law that's, pressuring you to have a homemade whatever, all the things, the cravings and all that stuff. It's very broad, I guess, and very individual, because each person has different issues that they deal with.
Yeah.
But I love it when probably my favorite thing is when people get off medications.
Oh, wow.
And that is not something that I do. I'm not a doctor. I don't tell them to get off their medication, but they go back to the doctor. I always encourage them to check in with their doctor, and they go back and the doctor says, "Oh my goodness, your blood pressure, like it's amazing. Let's try taking you off the blood pressure medication." And then it's
Yeah,
like, "Oh wow, your blood glucose, it's normal. You don't need the metformin anymore," and I get so excited. Like that's my happiest when that happens.
that's
Um,
great.
and also when people have diabetes and suddenly, they don't have diabetes anymore. That's amazing. But it can go back the other way. It's really important to know that this is not a magic cure where, you eat low carb or keto for a few months and suddenly you're not diabetic and then you just go great and you just eat what you ate
Mm,
before. Because, of course, the same foods are going to lead you back in the same direction again.
yes,
So it needs to be a lifestyle change, not
that's
just
right.
a quick fix. Yeah, so that's
Yes.
important to get that message across to people, which they don't always like hearing. But once they get used to it, actually, it becomes a lifestyle. They actually, most of them love it. So it's not a problem.
The problem is the environment is very obesogenic. So there's
Yes.
carbs everywhere, there's treats, and then you go out for dinner and you might have a cake or drinks or alcohol. I've had a lot of diabetics that does very well and then it becomes slack and then the diabetes got worse because they sneaked in a little bit more snacks and a bit more carbs and they've just got to
Yep.
fine tune again and then their diabetes get better again. So it's a bit of a
It's ironic,
journey.
but sometimes I think it's actually easier to not um, have too many exceptions. Like
Mm,
if you say, well, every time I go out, oh, well, it's a party, it's a wedding,
mm,
it's a dinner, it's whatever, I'll just, eat whatever. The more
mhm.
often you do that, the harder it is to stick
Yeah,
to the lifestyle because it's almost like it's not part of your identity anymore. And I know that might sound strange to say that food should be part of your identity, but it kind of helps to sort of be like, I am a person that doesn't eat these things.
yeah.
They don't agree with me. They are making me sick. Especially in the case if you've got or had diabetes, then you really genuinely can say those foods are making me sick. And like sometimes I'll have people say, offer me something and say, oh, it's just once, and go on,
Mm,
you can do it. And I just, I'm always polite, and I always thank them, but I just say, oh, I really appreciate that, but I won't feel good. So, I'm not going to have it, and most people understand, but some people do push. And I think that then if you just sort of say, this is like medicine for me,
mm,
like I need to do this for my health, and especially if you do have a condition like diabetes, then it's much easier. You can actually say that, and people will usually, respect that. So, I do actually find, yeah, the more you stick to it, the easier it is. The more you kind of give
mm.
yourself permission to go off course, the easier it is to have what I call the stuff it mentality. Oh, well, I've had one meal like that, stuff it, I'll have another one. And then it's a week, and then it's a month, and then it's like
Yes.
low carb, what? So yeah,
Yeah, I think it's quite helpful to be changing identity and labeling yourself as a low carb or ketogenic. Because if you're a
absolutely.
vegetarian, you're not going to sway away from vegetarian or vegan.
Exactly.
I
That's a
call
really good
myself a low
analogy.
carb GP, so I'm a low carb GP, and I better not sway away from low carb GP
Yeah.
because that is my identity now.
Yes. Well, when I was a vegetarian, I would look at a menu in a restaurant and I literally wouldn't see the things that had meat. My eyes would scan over them as if they didn't exist, and I'd just go to the vegetarian things. It's
Yep,
exactly the same now, low carb.
yep,
I just don't like if I'm going out for breakfast and I see pancakes on the menu, it's like it doesn't exist. It's not
yes.
even a question. It's not even a should I, shouldn't I? It's just like that's not me. That's not what I eat. You just don't
Same.
even think about it, and it
That's
takes
right.
time to get there. Doesn't happen straight away.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the easier it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be looking at the protein first, those with lots of big meat and big protein, big eggs, bacon and eggs, sausage and eggs, or some chicken or some steak,
Yep.
way before and tell them to don't bring the chips, don't bring the mash.
Yes.
If
Much
you, if
better
it's
to ask
there,
them not to bring it because then you don't have to look at it.
that's right. Yes, you don't have to think about, oh, should I eat? Should I not eat? There's no temptation. Tell them to not bring it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Um, okay, another question from Peter. He said he buys beef fat at the Vic market for $5 a kilo, make tallow, which I use for all frying. I find tallow gentler on my stomach than butter. Try to be dairy free to see if I feel better. Do you think dairy free would be better to control moods? Hmm.
Um, well, I haven't read a lot about that. The only thing I know about in relation to dairy and moods is that for some people, the casein in the dairy can have an effect on the brain.
Mhm.
It turns into a casomorphine, which can be quite addictive. And often people with autism and maybe other mental health type
Mm.
conditions might have this issue with gluten and dairy because the protein in both of them, gluten is a protein and casein from dairy is a protein. They
Mhm.
can both affect the brain. And that can affect mood, but not everybody is, that doesn't happen to everybody. So again, going back to the individual thing, go off dairy for a few weeks and see how you feel. And if you feel better, then obviously do what's right for you. But I will say that butter is probably one of the least problematic dairy foods because it's got hardly any protein and hardly any lactose. So
Mhm.
anyone who's reacting to the proteins or the lactose, unlikely to react to butter because that is just almost pure fat. If you want
Mm.
even purer, you would go with ghee, which is
Mhm.
clarified butter.
Yeah.
But butter itself, like I was allergic to dairy for many, many years, and I had a whole host of symptoms. And going keto, that was another thing that keto fixed for me after being, really, really reactive to dairy. Going keto, I can now have dairy, which is great. But even when I was reacting to dairy, I could still cope with butter because it didn't have the things in it that most people react to. So, but by all means, beef tallow is fantastic too. And
Mm.
if you feel better, I just always think listen to your body. That is like the
Mm.
number one piece of advice. If you feel better without dairy, then cut out dairy. And yes, it is possible that it can affect your mood, but it's not a big one. It's not the first thing I would think of with mood, but certainly for some people, like I say, they can be sensitive to the casein and gluten
Yes.
as well. Although if you're low carb, I'm assuming you're not having gluten.
Mhm.
Although, having said that, be careful. Some low carb products add gluten to them because gluten itself, even though gluten itself is like maybe 1/10 of the wheat or the rye or the barley, it is protein. It's not an essential amino acid protein, like yay, protein, we need it. But it is a protein.
Mm.
And so what they do with a lot of low carb products, especially bread, is they add gluten, not the whole wheat because that's got the carbs in it. They just add gluten. So what that means is that you've actually got a much higher gluten product than if you were eating regular bread, even though the carbohydrates are lower
Mhm.
and it says high protein, but it's not the, essential amino acids that we actually need. So it all looks great on the label. It says high protein, it says low carb, but it can be a real irritant on the gut. And if you
Mm.
have issues with gluten, it can affect the rest of your body too, especially if you've got leaky gut and the proteins
Yeah.
can get into the bloodstream and affect the brain and other issues, other parts of the body. And that can affect mood. So
Yeah.
just keep an eye out, even if you're low
Mhm.
carb. If you're going to buy a low carb bread, for example, in the supermarket, most low carb breads will have added gluten, and a whole bunch of other revolting things too. So
I think
yeah,
I looked at most of the low carb bread in the supermarket and I could not find
it's
anything without
no,
gluten.
no. My favorites, if you want to have some low carb bread, there's the no grainer, which
Mm.
is usually found in health food shops or online,
Yeah.
and the Venerdi hemp and something or other. They do a reasonably good one as well, and that is again from health food shops mostly or online.
Yep.
But the supermarket ones, I don't think I've ever found a good one. Or make your own. super easy. Anyone wants to message me, I've got some recipes I can send you. I'm not a bread baker. I'm not into kneading it and leaving it for hours to rise and all that rubbish. It's just like chuck it all in and cook it, and it works. So yeah.
Yeah, quite often I would make my own low carb bread, quite often with lots of eggs, coconut flour or almond flour.
Yep.
And
Lots
it's
of
really
nuts and
easy.
seeds.
That's
Yep.
it, nuts and
Yep.
seeds and hemp
Yep.
seeds.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've got lots of recipes on that as well. So he said his friend thinks he's going to die because he's going carnivore, low carb.
Oh,
And
right. So I'm assuming you're talking about like cholesterol and all that stuff. Is that?
yes, everyone's warning us low carbers or carnivores that
Yeah.
we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Well,
Look,
we are going to die.
well, of course we're all going to die. Look, I think the proof is in the pudding, you know. If you're losing weight and feeling great and, like I think it's quite ironic, when people go to their doctor and, I just saw something on Instagram today, actually, a low carb doctor who said that one of their patients had, improved all their symptoms, got off all these medications, all these incredible things happening. Their blood work was fabulous. They went to a regular GP who said, oh no, this is dangerous. We need to put you on all these medications and stuff. And it's like, what?
Uh,
Like, and I mean, when it comes down to cholesterol and all of that, I think, as you know, Avi, they don't do all the tests. They just do a generic cholesterol test and, look at the total LDL, and they don't look at the subfractions, whether they're the
that's
actual, the
it.
small dense ones that are dangerous or the large buoyant ones that aren't. And so they haven't got the full picture. They're making decisions based on, not enough information, and they're not looking at things like insulin, which is super important. And
Yes.
yeah.
So most of the time when patients come in to see me, I would be measuring their fasting insulin.
Yeah.
And a lot of people come in and because their doctor's not supportive and want to put them on the statin and
Yeah.
worry about their lifestyle, not eating fruit and veggies.
Yeah.
Just we'll wind this up soon, but Gail has asked, how do you know if you have leaky gut? Is there a test for it? Do you test?
Oh, leaky gut is is a really hard one. I don't know that there's a specific test. It's something that I'm actually doing more research into at the moment, and it's an area that I am interested in, but it's not something that my focus really is low carb and keto. So that's kind of not my space. So I would definitely suggest finding like a functional medicine doctor or, someone who specializes in the gut, because the gut is a very tricky thing. But I think that there are a lot of issues that come from leaky gut. When you do have body-wide issues, like pain, for example, and other issues that I think can be caused by a leaky gut. But it's not. I don't think leaky gut is a medical term, although it is gradually. There is more and more research, showing that those tight junctions in the gut can, come apart and allow things to go through that wouldn't normally go through. And but it is quite new research. It's not something that your GP is probably going to know about. I don't know how much you know about it, Avi, but
There is a test that you can do.
yep,
The medical term is called increased intestinal permeability.
yep,
So you can get tests and test zonulin, which is a protein that is released when you have leaky gut, or you can breathe in some protein and then weigh it out and see how much it goes in. I haven't gone into that much because I think the treatment is to eat real food and go low carb or go
yeah.
ketogenic diet. So whether we find out if you're leaky gut or not, I'm still going to promote low carb keto.
Yeah. Well, even just the fact that I can now eat dairy and I couldn't before, I think that is probably coming from the gut, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
That I probably did have leaky gut. And then when I went keto, I think it perhaps, yeah, healed. And that's why, I think quite possibly that the proteins from the dairy were going into my body.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah,
I'm only
absolutely.
guessing that though, but yeah.
That's it. So Sylvia said, how do you reintroduce things, say butter, to see if you can tolerate it after eliminating it?
Um, so I guess if you want to reintroduce dairy, I would probably, start with ghee, because ghee is the least reactive dairy, because it is the most pure of the fat. And usually very few people react badly to the fat. They normally react to either the protein or the lactose, which is the sugar part of it. So I'd start with a small amount of ghee. And then if you're okay with that, do that for a couple of days. And if you have no reaction, then I would do butter. Just always starting with a really small amount, maybe just a teaspoon or so, and then, have a little bit more for a few days. And then if that's okay, then maybe you could start with some hard cheese, because that has got the least lactose in it, and then maybe yogurt, and then like maybe milk and cream are probably the worst, because they've got the most lactose as well as the proteins. So, but it does depend which thing you're reacting to. So
Yes.
some people react to the proteins and some people react to the lactose. Usually the lactose is more gut type of reactions, whereas the proteins is more maybe skin, or some people get like asthma or things like that. So it does depend. So if you know which part is the thing that you're reacting to. So if you know it's lactose that you're reacting to, then especially make sure you start with low lactose things first, and gradually move your way up. But I just do it. I do it really gradually, and I'd make sure you're not changing anything else, because you don't want to confound the variables and, make other changes. So make sure everything else you're eating, you're okay with, and then just really gradually go from the least reactive to the most reactive, and just little bits at a time, and then work your way up and see if you're all right.
That's it. That's great advice. All right, we'll have one last question and then we'll wrap it up. Do you recommend extra fiber if you're low carb?
Well, look, fiber is one of those things that it's becoming controversial, which you never used to think that it was, because everybody used to be, think fiber was fabulous. And now you have a whole bunch of carnivores saying you don't need fiber. So look, I do think it's an individual thing, and there are people who have issues with some types of fiber, and like more of the FODMAP types fiber, I guess, things like, onions and leeks and garlic and broccoli and cauliflower, and there's sort of some vegetables that people react to more than others. But if you don't react badly, then I still think that fiber is good if it works for you. I know that there are people out there who are carnivore who don't have any fiber and they say they're fine, but I don't think that necessarily works for everybody. And I do wonder, I haven't kind of made my mind up on this, but I do wonder whether the carnivores actually just need to heal their gut so that they can include fiber again. But having said that, if they're thriving, then I wouldn't ever suggest to someone to change something that's working for them. So generally speaking, and it is individual, like I always say, I can't say for everyone, but generally speaking, I do think getting a range of low carb fruits like berries and low carb veggies is a good thing. It does give you a lot of nutrients. Not that you can't get nutrients from animal products, because you can, and it's amazing. But there's a lot of antioxidants, and the fiber obviously helps a lot of people. Some people do have issues going to the toilet if they don't have that fiber. Some people do find the opposite though, and they find that fiber stops them from going to the toilet. So
absolutely.
again, it's really individual. There is no one size fits all. But if you're loving your fruit and veggies, don't stop because the carnivores are telling you that you don't need fiber. That's what I would say. And I think in the main, most people probably do well on a variety of foods that gives their gut bugs lots of things to feed off,
Yes.
But there are exceptions to that, and I'm not against carnivores. If it's working, great, but I don't think it's for everyone.
It's quite a controversial area.
It is, yeah.
Because Anthony Chapey keeps saying that the plants are trying to kill you, but majority of human,
think about as well how people used to prepare plants.
Yes.
Where today, we don't ferment things. We don't, like do, soak things. We don't like, we add all the herbicides and pesticides. There's so many things that we've added or not done to them to
Yeah.
make them, try to kill us, like Anthony Chapey says. And I do agree that there are things in certain plants that that can cause issues, but there's usually a way around it, whether it's peeling the skin off or soaking it or sprouting it or fermenting it or whatever it is. And it's just about whether you can be bothered to do that, I guess,
Yes.
and whether you're personally reactive, because some people react to certain things and other people don't. And it's also a load thing as well.
That's it.
I guess maybe avoid super high oxalate foods, like people who are eating, having kale smoothies 3 times a day. Maybe, that's not fabulous because it's raw and there's a lot of it condensed, and you got to use common sense as well, like, yeah, it's very individual. I can't say
That's
100%.
it.
Yeah.
Most of the human in the planet do eat veggies, and
Yes.
most of the people don't have any problems.
Yeah.
But certainly the carnivores, a lot of them are thriving. So
Yeah.
I think it's very different in different people.
Yeah. But not everyone does. Some people do carnivore and feel terrible. So,
That's it.
it's not a one size fits all. It never is.
Wow, very inspirational conversation. That's amazing. The take-home message is everyone's different. We've got to
Yes,
find our own journey and we've got to explore how we feel.
absolutely.
So I've got to do my pitch and we're going to talk about this dinner that I have invited you to do. So tell
Yes.
us, I've invited you to be a guest speaker in our low carb dinner. Tell us
Thank
just a
you.
little bit about what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a little bit of an intro just about my journey again, and how I got to where I've got. And then I thought, I always think that when you hear someone speak, it's good to have some takeaways, something that you can go home with and say, I learned that, I can implement that. That's a helpful tip. So what I want to do is share my top 3 strategies, I guess, for being able to sustain low carb or keto. So I won't give away what they are because you'll have to come to the
Great.
dinner and hear. But they're things that for me made all the difference, that I honestly don't know that I could have done it without these things. And they're strategies that I still use. But they were especially important in the early days when I was coming off carbs and really needed some help, because especially if you are feeling like you're addicted to certain foods, it is a tough journey at the beginning. And so yes, I'd like to just provide some strategies that I hope will be fairly simple and simple to implement, and maybe things that people have dismissed in the past, but might be able to look at it from a slightly different perspective, and yeah, hopefully be useful.
Great. So you've got to buy a ticket and come to the dinner at Bucatini Restaurant at Mitcham. This is the 18th of May. Oh, 2023. What did I do?
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
So you can scan this QR code or you can go to my website and it's $99 a ticket. There's a big goodie bag. I've lined up so many sponsors to sponsor, and there's a lucky draw with lots of prizes. So there's only 60 tickets, no, 60 people to come to the dinner, which includes us, 3 of us speakers. So I'm only selling 57 tickets. Charlene might do some hypnosis, which is very, very interesting.
I'm excited about
So
that.
yeah, I'll get
I was trying to think
whoever.
if I had any magic tricks up my sleeve, but I can't compete with hypnosis, I'm afraid.
But 3 practical tips on low carb, that's fantastic. So for those of you who don't know what I do fortnightly low carb pro webinars every second Thursday night at 7:30. I will do a group coaching program called Low Carb Pro. So you can go to my website and sign up to Low Carb Pro. $25 a month. You can sign up or you can discontinue anytime you like. And you can see me in my clinic, either telehealth or face-to-face. And as a special for tonight, I've got these online courses. you can use the code MASTERCLASS and you can grab a sale for 40% off for the next 3 days. So the benefits course is still $0. It's free of charge. You can download it and you can listen to all the lessons with Linda and myself. The 8 weeks complete course is always there. It's about $490 and you can grab a 40% off. The 7-day lifestyle course is still for sale from the beginning of the year, and within 7 days you learn about lifestyle. And functional breathing course is a workshop that I did with Julie Bristow. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Carla, especially for so much great contribution, great information for us.
Thank you for having me.
Before we finish, I want to tell you about an exciting event I'll be hosting. I have planned a low-carb dinner at Bucatini Restaurant in Mitcham on Saturday, 18th of May, 6:30. Please join us in this event with delicious food, inspiring conversations, and practical insights on how to live a low-carb lifestyle. I have invited health coach Charlene Lester and nutritionist Carla Carter as guest speakers. I have organised sponsors with prizes in the goodie bags. We have plenty of time to ask questions and connect with each other. And we'll have an amazing lucky draw with lots of contribution from our sponsors. So please join me in this amazing event I have put together for you. Don't miss out, reserve your spot, tickets are limited. Head to my website or check out the show notes for more details. Hope to see you there. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Prescribing Lifestyle. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and motivating. Remember, your health journey is a marathon, not a sprint. Implementing small, sustainable changes over time can lead to sustainable improvements in your well-being. Remember, these podcasts are not to be treated as medical advice. You should see your own doctor for medical treatment, or you can come in to see me in my clinic in Melbourne Low-Carb Clinic, face-to-face or telehealth Australia-wide. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate and review us on your favourite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you valuable content. I also want to invite you to head to the website of Melbourne Low-Carb Clinic to download a free ebook and join my free community on Facebook. Stay connected with us on the socials. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family who might benefit from our discussions. Until next time, keep prioritizing your health and embrace the power of lifestyle medicine. Take care and see you soon on Prescribing Lifestyle.